This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. You can visit their store by using my referral link in the description below. Hi everyone, I'm Nizzanotes, and today is Saturday, and that means it's time for Nizzanotes, my weekly vlog series that talks about limited magic. We're kind of in between formats here. We're at the point where people don't really want the Brothers War content, but we're also at the point where we can't really talk about Phyrexia All Will Be One because preview season hasn't begun in full. Next weekend's episode will probably be the first one that talks about Phyrexia All Will Be One, because by that point we'll know all the mechanics in the set, and I always like to sort of talk about how I think the new mechanics will fare in Limited and stuff. But for today we're doing another general topic, and I wanted to talk about bread drafting. That might sound weird to you if you've never heard the phrase before, since I just said bread drafting, and that sounds strange out of context. But what bread drafting is it stands for, it's a limited heuristic that stands for what should be valued by limited players, by drafters in particular. And the B stands for bombs, the R stands for removal, the E stands for evasion, the A stands for aggro, and then D stands for something. People... you're not going to find one answer for what these stand for, honestly, and that's one of the problems with using this, and that's actually what this video is mostly about, the problems with using this bread idea. You're not going to find everyone agreeing that this is what these stand for, which itself tells you it's not a great heuristic because everybody may be interpreting it differently. But this is the ones that I think make the most sense and that you see probably the most. The D stands for duds or something like that, bad cards. This is probably, if you've played Limited for a while, especially, it's probably something you've heard at some point. And if you haven't, then, you don't hear it nearly as much these days. But I still see people recommending using it, like in comments and on Reddit and various places. And there's some serious problems here. I do want to say, if you have to get someone ready to play Limited for the first time in their life, telling them to do this, and telling them what the letters stand for, is probably the most efficient way to tell them without them ending up with a completely terrible deck. But once you get beyond the point where it's like a learner, like a beginner's thing, it starts to not really hold water. The way you should value cards is more complicated than this. The first thing I want to talk about is the B, bombs. So one problem with this is that people have completely different definitions of what a bomb is. I think most of us who play a bunch of Limited and create content, when we say bomb, we mean a card that utterly reshapes the game in your favor. If your opponent doesn't deal with it, they're dead. And then the biggest bombs are the ones that even if your opponent does deal with it, they're probably dead. But I see the word bomb devalued all the time when talking about Limited. I've seen people call premium removal bombs. I've seen people call any sort of big trampoline creature a bomb. And it shouldn't be used that way. If you watch my set reviews and stuff, I'm pretty stingy about my bomb grades. And that's because most sets just don't have very many cards in it that are classified as a bomb. Most sets have about 20, cards that end up being straight up bombs, real bombs that you would get an A grade in my set review. So telling someone to take a bomb, first of all, you'd have to define it and you have to make it clear how good they are. And some people use the word for any good card, basically, when it's far more complicated than that. And the other thing is most packs just won't have one, So telling someone to take them, you want to take the cool, flashy, rare, or mythic, they're probably going to figure that one out, right? I think. So the problem with the B in bread is mostly varying definitions on what a bomb is, and also it's not that helpful in 99% of pack one, pick one situations. Let's look at the R now, which stands for removal. So, this Limited, this phrase, bread drafting, it's been around for 20 years, right? And I think it held more water 20 years ago than it does now. And that's part of the problem. It kind of needs an update because removal is not, in most formats these days, it is not the thing you should value the second most. It's important and it's good, especially it needs to be premium removal. So let's keep that in mind. That's a problem here if you just look at this bread thing. A 5-mana removal spell that does 5 to something, or a 5-mana removal spell that kills a creature, those are not things you should be taking very highly. Premium removal, cards that are highly efficient, that kill a wide variety of creatures, frequently at instant speed, that you should be taking highly. But it's not just all removal, okay? So don't fall into being like, okay, there's not a bomb in this pack. I'm going to take a 5 mana card that does 5 damage to an opposing creature at sorcery speed. If someone's really honoring this, that's kind of what they're going to end up doing, and you shouldn't. But even when it comes to the highly premium removal these days, there are a lot of creatures, like really efficient, powerful, uncommon and common creatures we see these days that you would just take over removal. Removal is only a 1-for-1 most of the time. If it's premium, it has a potential to not be often. But there are lots of commons they print these days that are just better than a 1-for-1 removal spell. Cards like Inspiring Overseer from Streets of New Capenna. This basically always gives you a 2-for-1. In the Brothers' War, I would take Scrapwork Cohort over most of the format's removal. This gives you so many bodies and it synergizes so well with the format that you would take that over a lot of things. Don't get me wrong, what I'm saying here is removal is good, but in this day and age, there are a lot of just efficient, good creatures that give you more than one card of value. You should just be taking over 1-for-1 removal most of the time. So, yeah, removal's good. You need it in your deck, but getting really good creatures that give you more than one card of value is better. So this is another area where bread just doesn't hold up. It doesn't really make sense to value removal over evasion and aggro all the time. And that brings us to our next category. E stands for evasion. And so what this one means is creatures that are difficult to block effectively, and that's definitely true. This one of all of these maybe it's in the most correct spot. It's kind of in the middle, but there are lots of efficient evasive creatures you should be taking ahead of removal. So they're out there. Like Inspiring Overseer, which is for another insane example. And so they've powered up creatures a lot, and removal has gotten worse for the most part over the last 20 years. And that's why a big part of why this doesn't work anymore. There are a bunch of good evasive creatures you take over removal. And then aggro, there's a bunch of aggressive creatures you take over removal. Especially, we've had a lot of formats lately where being assertive, playing an early, powerful thing is really good. Curving out is great. You've got good combat tricks. There's all these things that are going on now, that, evasion and aggro are often, the best versions of evasion and aggro that aren't bombs are still going to be better than removal most of the time. So, and then the D, what does this stand for? I mean, I guess unplayables, but that's kind of meaningless. So that, just to break down what the letters stand for and how it doesn't make sense anymore, 20 years after somebody came up with this to use it, that's the first part here. We're breaking that down. But then there's a bunch of stuff that it doesn't value at all, that you do need to keep in mind when you're drafting. One thing that's not here at all that is massively important is curve, okay? You need to have a good mana curve in most limited formats or you're going to be in trouble. And that's not here at all. So if you're really just valuing bombs, removal, evasion, aggro in that order and not taking your curve into account, you're not going to have a good deck, okay? It's just not going to work out for you. So there's more that needs to factor into your picks than just bread. So you need to think about the synergy in a given set too. So synergy and curve aren't here at all. And those are really I'd say the last 5 years of limited, those might be two of the most important things in determining the picks that you're going to make. And so the fact that this old bread method of drafting completely leaves those out is a problem. So, yeah, I feel like I'm sort of dumping on this thing that for a lot of people is the foundation of how they draft. And I guess I kind of am. But, we have to change with the times. And the game has changed, in general. Since Magic began, creatures have gotten better and spells have gotten worse overall. And, that's just sort of the trend that has been happening. Spells were insane in the early days and creatures were awful. Now, both spells and creatures are often better. They have enter the battlefield abilities and stuff like that, so they're kind of like spells. They're often better than spells, especially in limited. And that's what's really hurt removal, especially in its place within the bread hierarchy. And, you do take removal. I want to be clear. You do take removal over medium creatures, right? But there's just so many creatures in every set that I would take over most removal that you can see this really doesn't make sense anymore. So again, I think bread, if you really need to quickly explain to someone what they should be valuing in a draft, this is a way to do it that isn't terrible. But if you have more than like 10 minutes, you should probably explain a little more than this, especially because this bread method overall is outdated. And really, it's not going to send you down the right path in most limited formats that we play today. So that'll do it for this edition of Nizzanotes. Like I said, next week I'll be back. We'll be talking about the Phyrexia All Will Be One mechanics and how I feel like they'll perform in limited. That also means a set review is right around the corner. I guess a couple of weeks away at this point. We've got the set review coming down, and that's always a fun time. So if you want to make sure you catch all that content, don't forget to subscribe. If you're already subscribed but want to catch up on previous content, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.